Hello, my name is George Williams. I'm the developer for IntelliQuest, and just going to be taking the time with this video to run you through some of the apps that we have, different stages of a few of the apps, kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this game, where we came from, and I'll talk a bit about myself, my background, and also talk about where we're thinking of taking the game in the future, and how we're going to incorporate data collection into making the game more adaptable. But to start, I have a background in software engineering. Have a bachelor's degree in software engineering from University of Phoenix, and programming is something I've always wanted to do and I've always liked doing. The thing that really got me into wanting to become a programmer, though, was video games. After playing Chrono Trigger back in the late 2000s, or not late 2000s, late 1990s, I said to myself and my friend who was watching me play it at the time, someday I'm going to make a game like this. And that's kind of how things played out. I self-taught myself C++ in 2007 over the course of about 9 months, using a online website called GameInstitute.com. So I've been interested in gaming, making games for a while, game development for a while, programming for a long time. And when Edgar and Jeff came to me with this idea, the other aspect of the teaching and improving people through gaming thing that I'm also kind of attracted to really leapt out at me from what they were describing, and that's why I signed on with the project. So the idea behind this game is that we're going to create something that's stealth learning. That's what they called it back in the 90s. Basically, except not stealth learning. It's not going to be about teaching, it's going to be about building. The way we teach is we teach through route memorization and just kind of dumping information on students and expecting them to be able to take that information in, internalize it, and then reproduce something either that is what they heard or read or saw, or something that they've gone through and kind of reprocessed into their own understanding that's generally, correct. The problem with that is that in some cases the way that the students have developed means that they can't do one or more of those steps. What this game is aiming to do is to use a model called a psychoanalytical model called the structure of intellect to identify the areas where a student or a person may be developmentally challenged and help to bring them up to the level they should be at. Edgar and Jeff will have talked about the model more in detail and explained all that stuff, so I won't go too far into that, too much further into that. So let's go ahead and just jump into the apps. So the first thing I want to show you is, and I want to mention that I haven't been using Unreal Engine 4 for very long, just about almost a year and a half to 2 years, I think, somewhere in there. I have my own projects and my own game I'm working on in UE4, so I'm not completely a complete neophyte to it, but I'm also not to the point where I've learned all that I can learn about it. It seems almost every day I'm learning some new stuff, and I'm able to apply it to things I've done in the past. But anyway, so this is one of our proof of concept apps. So all of our apps that we initially were planning for went through a proof of concept stage where we just loaded it into this kind of a map, the first person template map, and we just put in the functionality, maybe a little bit of other geometry that would simulate how the apps would work in the actual version, the full version of the app. But it's mostly just functionality and testing the ideas we had to see if they were practical and could be done. So this is one of those. In this one, all we're doing is spawning in some boxes, and the player then interacts with the boxes using the left mouse button to fire a line trace. And well, not actually, it's not even that complex yet. This one, you just bring up an overlay, and it continuously fires a line trace. Or after the line traces have hit an object enough times, the object is removed, and the player gets a point. And once all the objects are found, new objects are spawned in, and a new exercise for the app begins. So we had this whole structure built out. We're still kind of going to do that, but it may not necessarily be all contained within the same instance of the app. We're thinking now about spreading out instances of the apps throughout the game so that there's more gameplay. There's not so much time spent per app, individual instance of an app, and also so that we can implement some of the earlier apps later on in the game as we get through each season, which I'll talk about later. So I'll just drop into this and show you how this works. So we got some boxes being spawned. The player brings up the binocular overlay, and after a time, the boxes are moved and they get a diamond up there. I'll talk about the diamonds in the last segment of this video. So I'm just going to go and remove all the boxes here. And once the last one's removed, the diamond counter is reset, and 4 more boxes are spawned. I think one of them flew outside of the map, actually. Let's see. Well, if it did, I'm not going to be able to tell because it's going to have gone down below the map, the floor here, to the bottom of the abyss. Anyway, so that's this first proof of concept app. From this, then we went to we're at a pre-alpha stage of the app now. So the way we're going to be doing this is we'll do these proof of concepts. We'll do a pre-alpha, which is the functionality we developed here in a more appropriate setting for what the app is going to be at the end of the development of it. Then we'll have the app and the alpha state, which is and a rough version of what's going to be the final, what'll be in the final product. Then the beta stage, which will be a more polished version of that, and then the release state, which is the fully completed app within the environment that's going to take place inside of the game. So this app became this for the I think it's this one. No, it's not this one. It is this one. Wait, did it open? Oh yeah, it did open, okay. I don't want to go full screen. Come on. I don't know why this is such a small window. Alright, so the idea for this is that the player will be going through a meadow at the beginning of the game. Well, not really a meadow, it's a forest. There'll be like a path there traveling down that's dirt, and it'll be flanked with some grass, and then that'll be flanked with trees, and eventually they'll go through this path and come to a meadow, which will be a pretty open and expansive location where they'll have to find animals or symbols or whatever we're trying to have them find. There'll also be some of these as they're going along the path as well. And once they complete that, then they'll go through another path to another meadow, and then do it a third time, and then there'll be a last path that will take them up to the next app, which takes place in a cave. Excuse me. So, this is just a kind of example map of what the general idea is. So, for example, we have some grass here that we spawned in, or added in with the foliage tool. We're going to be spawning some monsters, yeah, thinking of Monster Hunter, some animals into the grass in various stages, depending on what size they are, eventually. I turned that off for this particular demonstration of this, and some other things off, because they weren't functioning fully. And they're kind of, it takes a little bit of finagling to get them to work properly when they do work. The other mechanics are in here, like the player having to bring up an overlay and use the left mouse button to take a picture of the animal to select it. We have some other ideas too for that, and I'll talk about them while I'm demonstrating the app. Everything we're doing is through blueprints. We bring them in and then use references to them and to process the game, the app logic, and to bring in the items we want to use. I made a custom C++ class to go through our content folder and find the stuff we want to find. So that way each app, we just give it a folder path, and then we tell it the asset we want, and it'll pull in everything that we have in there. And then we can go through all the assets we have brought in that way to pull out a random sample of them to use for an app. That way, every time a player goes through an app, it'll be, if not significantly different, it'll be somewhat different in terms of what they're looking for. And as they're going through the apps, the game will be able to tell through some AI, which we'll talk about later on, and determine how difficult a particular app should be. I won't go too more in depth into the blueprints. Every time I do that, this video ends up being an hour long. So I just want to get get through this pretty quickly, so we're not using up too much of your time. So let's just drop into this, and we shall explain by doing. So, first thing you'll notice is these red line traces. These are part of the, and they're not going to be there in the final version, they're there for debugging, but they're part of the system that moves these animals to where they're going to end up at once they're spawned. I start by moving them to someplace in the air that's above the ground with this landscape, and then we are firing a line trace to the landscape and on the intersection points where we're putting the animals at on the Z position. I found this was a lot easier to do it this way than to try and do it some other ways, because the other ways weren't working for me for whatever reason. So as you can see, we got some stuff way out here where it shouldn't be, because I turned off some of the restrictions of where things are spawning, and some of these larger things shouldn't be out here. They should be back in this grass, but they're out here. So what happens is that the player goes up to an animal that they are looking for, and they use the B key to bring up the binoculars. What this will do in the next version of the app is it'll actually probably highlight the animal, and then once they do, they'll be able to bring up the camera and go take a picture of it, and that's what will trigger the animal to be selected, and they'll get the point, and then this animal cannot be selected anymore. So if they get stuck, they can use the hint button, which is tied to the H key. What this does is it brings up an arrow that will direct them to an animal. In this case, we are being led to, looks like this one here, to the snail. It'll show them a random animal, and it'll show them one that hasn't been selected yet. And that's the idea for this app. So they'll be going through these meadows, and eventually they'll be led up to a cave where the next CFU app will take place. So one thing that I have mentioned that Edgar and Jeff probably have is the kind of the way that we're making the story. It's going to be based around Mayan lore, ancient Mayan lore, and other Mesoamerican tribes from the Yucatan Peninsula area throughout time, like the Olmecs and maybe some of the other more recent ones like the Aztec and the Incas. We're going to be pulling from that for some of the design elements, as well as heavily for the story of the game. So what this is a cave they come to. When they first arrive at the cave, they're just going to see a normal cave. They won't see like this archway or this thing over here, which they actually won't see anyway, because that's going to be removed in the next version of this. And they'll just see a normal cave, and they'll just go back and return to the base camp for the research team that's come out. And they'll notice something strange when they get there, though. They'll notice that they can't interact with anything or anybody. Nobody seems to know that they're there. And over a relatively short period of time, once they get back there, they'll start seeing this creature start to appear. And it's the idea we had was to use a balam. Balam is a a jaguar spirit in Mayan mythos that supposedly guards against evil spirits. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this idea of the Balam to as the mentor, or the trying to think of a metaphor, because I make examples better in metaphors than directly. Kind of like the Hermione Granger of this game, where it's able to tell the player stuff that the player might be wondering about, and be able to direct the player to certain places and lead them through the game at various stages. I'm not going to get too deep into the motives of the Balam or what it actually is, because we're still not really sure ourselves on that. I have ideas, but that's something left more to maybe a story document to explain. So the Balam will tell them that they've been phased out of their that they're out of phase with the rest of the world around them, and that in order to return themselves to the phase plane that they came from, they have to go through this cave, and so the player comes back, and when they come back into this cave, they'll notice all this other stuff they didn't see before, because it exists outside of the normal realm of comprehension. This won't have this like texture on it. It'll look something similar to this, but it won't be the same textures. This is something I made in Blender over the course of a couple hours. As is this thing. The cave is made out of SM rock meshes. I decided to do this because it was taking too long and would take too long to finish the custom cave I was making in Blender. So I just made it out of this, and that's why we have this here, this block of polygons for this. It's because this rock mesh is there's variation in how it looks. It's not flat enough for these to show properly, I don't think. That's something we'll solve later on when we get a actual modeler to make a cave for us, cave system for us. But anyway, so this follows the same kind of structure in terms of the way the app processes. We have some blueprints that we have. Actually, we have a template that I made that contains all the stuff we need for every app, and about 70% of it is completely reusable, and we just have to change about 30%, up to 30% of it for any particular app, as long as it follows a similar structure to this. If it follows a completely different structure, then we have to create something new. Change more of it to make it work, but overall, we're able to reuse 70% of the template every time that we create an app with it. So it shaves a lot of time off, about 7 to 8 hours of work off of creating a new app. So they come in here. The Balam says you have to go through and solve puzzles to get through, and they'll notice this, and they'll have to first off to look at it and see that there's something there to define, an animal defined, or an object or a symbol. And then they have to select it using the camera like before. They won't have to use the binoculars in this one, just the camera. Once they find everything on these walls, well, it'll be the literal wall, the cave wall, this will reveal itself to be what it actually is. Maybe not to younger players that don't quite grasp the concepts of it, but for older players or people that watch sci-fi a lot, they'll instantly understand what this is. This is going to be a force field that'll have a wall being projected onto it to make it look like it's just a dead-end cave. Let's jump in. I think this isn't a new window. Let me move this out. Okay. So they'll come into the cave. The Balam will say something like, "Go find stuff," and they'll come over here. We want the lighting is such, we designed the lighting as such to be that you can't necessarily see stuff on these walls, cave walls, without having the flashlight on. So then you turn on the flashlight. And this is something of a Bob Ross moment here when I was testing this out the first time. The closer you get with the flashlight, the harder it is to see stuff, and the further away you get, because of the way the decals are made, apparently, the easier it is to see. So we actually found a metric that we can use to track how difficult players are finding the app by if they have to move away from the wall and how far they have to move away from it to feel comfortable looking at stuff. We can use the distance that they're standing to also have the AI do stuff. Like maybe if they're always standing here Maybe we make the AI make the images a little bit harder to see, or maybe we add more, or we change the tint on them a little bit or something. We'll talk more about the AI later at the end here. So like over here, they will bring up the camera, which isn't implemented yet, but they'll select the stuff. And then once they select the last one, the wall disappears in a spectacle like that, and then they realize, oh, we can continue going through the cave. So that's what this app is. So let's go ahead and talk about the other aspect of this, which is the AI and how we're going to be using stuff in the game, data collected from the game, to have the game adapt to the player. So as the player's playing through these apps, we'll be collecting various metrics, whether it's how fast they find things, how fast they complete stuff, how long they take to do certain tasks, how far they're standing away from objects when they complete tasks, things like that. And we'll be using that over time to compile a profile for the player for each of the factors that we're going to be having in phase in the first season of the game. And what we'll do with that information is the data will be fed back into an AI in the game, and the AI will look at that and say, okay, this player is low in CFU, so they should be given more CFU activities to do, and those activities should be easier, and then as they start progressing, they'll become a little bit harder and a little bit harder and a little bit harder. And the goal is to be able to take the information once the players have played it for, like, say, 6 months or so, and see if there is any progress in building up a particular ability. But we can see there's a general improvement, and we can use that then and say, okay, so there was this improvement, we saw the improvement. Was that amount of improvement the same as what they would have gotten if they went through a traditional program following the standard structure of intellect? Or is it better? The one thing we want to find out with this is if using gaming as a medium for this is more effective at training various factors than traditional methods. Nobody's tried to do this before. I don't think anybody's ever thought about doing it before, just because people that work with the structure of intellect are probably more towards the opinion that toys are toys. Like, games are just, like, for kids. They're not. They can't really be used as a tool for learning or for building up factors to the structure of intellect. And we want to see if we can do it, basically. In the words of Emperor Palpatine, I just want to see if we can do it, and if it works, how well it works, and if it works really well. Maybe figuring out ways that people haven't thought of before to train certain things, or maybe even, hopefully, at the end of the entirety of the game being developed, so we have all the 90 abilities in, and we've had time to process data and collect it, that we are able to look at it and say, oh, we have these other parts of the model that nobody knew existed before, that we can either infer exist, or that we can see exist, or that there's these connections that we didn't know were there before, and by training this ability, we're actually also increasing these other related abilities. We think that something like that could happen, that we could discover something about the model that was not known before, or we could discover that there are facets of the model that were implicated, or that were inferred by certain things but couldn't be proven, or were never fully explored because of the technologies at the time. Technology wasn't far long enough to lend itself to this kind of thing. So as the players are going through the game, they'll be collecting diamonds, and what they'll be able to do with those is they'll be able to buy things for their avatars on our website. They'll be able to unlock stuff in the game with it. Optional stuff that isn't stuff they would normally have access to, like much harder versions of puzzles. Maybe also access to some more kinds of game stuff in here, instead of not so much this kind of stuff, but like mini games and things that are a little bit more fun. So we have all these kinds of ideas that we're working on trying to interface the game, both with the data side and also with the more kind of social aspect of gaming these days, in terms of like competition over achievements and things like that. But yeah, so that's all we wanted to show you, and all I wanted to talk about today. Hopefully you found it interesting. We would appreciate feedback, and we look forward to hearing from you.